It's time for another WrestlePlanet news update, as Bray Wyatt shows off a new mask for the Fiend, the USA Network are disappointed with WWE, and we have an update regarding the Bray Wyatt mental health rumours from earlier this year. All that and more coming up in today's video, but first, we have an update from the Stamford Advocate, who recently discussed WWE's upcoming move from Titan Towers to a new headquarters across town. In March 2019, WWE announced its intentions to move to a location in downtown Stamford, which houses offices and a production center, with plans in place to move in early 2021. The relocation was delayed, likely due to the pandemic, but it's now been confirmed that the move will still take place and is planned for the fourth quarter of 2021. The company have estimated a capital expenditure of 85 to 105 million to begin construction, as well as to enhance WWE's production and technology infrastructure. The move will take them 2 miles west to 677 Washington Boulevard. AEW announcer Jim Ross recently appeared on his Grilling JR podcast to answer some fan questions. Obviously, after the recent rumors of a CM Punk debut in AEW, he was asked what he thought of the prospect of this happening. JR spoke of the benefits Punk could bring not only to AEW but the younger wrestlers on the roster, with Punk likely willing to share his knowledge with the other talent. And JR said, "I hope we sign him, I hope he's one of our guys. CM Punk is a treasure, and he can contribute a lot to a lot of guys if he's willing to share his knowledge, his expertise to other talents. He pays it forward and he has no problem doing so. That's my take on him. A lot of people are going to rely on him, ask questions for advice, coach him up, things of that nature if he does come, and he's kind of the guy that's willing to take his time, help a young talent improve their game. If CM Punk signs with us, he'll be used and valued in multiple areas, and I don't think that anybody that's concerned about his in-ring game has anything to worry about." Punk has been out of action for longer than 7 years at this point, which has brought up the question of ring rust. Despite the time off, JR feels that the limited AEW schedule will help balance this out and said, "Am I worried that his layoff's going to affect his work? We know it's going to affect his work to start with to some degree because he's 8 years older, he's in his 40s. That doesn't seem to matter in today's wrestling business, especially when you have a schedule like ours." CM Punk is expected to debut in AEW in less than 2 weeks' time, next Friday at AEW Rampage: The Last Dance. It's going to be an exciting few weeks in the lead up to AEW All Out next month, which is where I predict his first match will be. Next up, we have a story from last night's episode of Monday Night Raw, as Elias seems to be going under a gimmick change. The wrestling musician was shown stood by a fire outdoors, seemingly in the middle of a woods, as clips played of fans chanting Elias, whilst footage of him being hit with a guitar played over the top. He then threw his guitar on the flames before saying WWE stood for Walk with Elias, but Elias is dead. There is no word on what's next for Elias, but this character change follows a loss to Jackson Riker last month in a Symphony of Destruction match. And speaking of Monday Night Raw, before the show there were 2 matches taped for this Thursday's episode of Main Event, which features 4 NXT wrestlers. This week's show will feature a match between Dakota Kai and Aliyah, whilst Odyssey Jones will take on Austin Theory. Dakota Kai is set to challenge Raquel Gonzalez at NXT TakeOver 36 later this month for the NXT Women's title, whilst Aliyah is rumoured to have been part of the NXT Raw trade that saw Mandy Rose move to the Black and Gold brand. Austin Theory is currently written off of NXT television after walking out on his former faction The Way, and Odyssey Jones is currently part of the NXT Breakout Tournament and is set to wrestle Trey Baxter in the semi-finals. It seems WWE higher-ups may want to take a closer look at these NXT talents for a potential call-up in the future, perhaps ahead of the draft, which is expected to happen in October. On July 31st, WWE shocked the wrestling world when they released Bray Wyatt from his contract, making him a free agent. Since then, there has been a lot of talk about what is next for the former Universal Champion, who hasn't been seen since WrestleMania 37. The man himself took to Twitter this week to seemingly tease the return of the Fiend character, or at least something similar, after he posted an image of a mask on Twitter. The photo was captioned "You can't kill it," implying the Fiend's reign of terror isn't isn't done just yet. Whilst he's unable to use the Fiend name due to WWE holding the trademark for the term, the next stage of the character outside of WWE could use a different name. As I've discussed before, I hope Wyatt ends up in AEW where his creativity can truly flourish, and whilst I enjoyed the early Fiend, I hope the character is a crazed man using his scary outfit to strike fear into his opponent, rather than a literal mythical being with magical powers. A grounded version of the Fiend could be very intriguing. There's also the chance that Wyatt has managed to strike an agreement with WWE for a return, similar to how Samoa Joe renegotiated terms with the company, but that's yet to be seen. And speaking of Wyatt, chance for the Eater of Worlds returned last night during Alexa Bliss's match, as Bliss took on and defeated Doudrop in singles action thanks to a distraction from that doll Lily. During the bout, the Orlando crowd would chant "We want Wyatt," which led to the term trending on Twitter. Clearly, the WWE fanbase feel releasing Bray Wyatt was a mistake, and they're letting their feelings known. This follows chants of the same nature last week in Chicago. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you scroll down and drop a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head towards 20,000 subscribers. But now that you've done that, let's get on with the rest of the video. Last week, 13 NXT talents were released from WWE ahead of apparent major changes to the brand. According to PW Insider, changes include a brand new logo, new lighting and overall look, and a different format to the show with a shift in focus on younger talent, with Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer adding that WWE want, quote, "no more midgets, no one starting in their 30s, they want people that can be box office attractions and main characters," and those are said to be the words of someone within WWE. We have an update on the situation, this time from Andrew Zarian of the Mat Men podcast, who has spoke to higher ranked individuals in the USA Network who are said to be disappointed with the situation. Zarian took to Twitter to say, "Hearing a lot of chatter from USA Network higher ranked reps regarding the releases from NXT." And this next bit is a quote apparently from the USA Network saying, "Personally, I'm disappointed with how this is going." Zarian continued, "The perception from many is that these upcoming changes will be negative. Perception means everything, especially when you are working with partners who are not pro wrestling fans and don't have deep knowledge of the talent. In reality, are the changes coming to NXT a bad thing? Time will tell." NXT started broadcasting on the USA Network in September 2019 on Wednesday nights, before moving to Tuesdays after constantly losing in the ratings battle with AEW, who ran on the same time slot. NXT's ratings still haven't picked up despite there no longer being competition from another wrestling show. Whilst WWE are looking to freshen up the brand, it seems their main broadcaster isn't happy with the direction the show is heading. It's unknown when these changes will take place, whether it be before the upcoming NXT TakeOver 36 show or after. Now let's get back to Bray Wyatt and debunk some fake news from several months ago. There had been rumors that Wyatt was out of action after WrestleMania 37 due to mental health issues. The story stated that he asked for time off because of this, which is said to have gotten him heat with Vince McMahon. Now it's important to look at the source for this, as the news originally came from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Sheet podcast, which is hosted by Vince Russo and the often discredited Bill Batty, and let's just say there's a reason that this wasn't discussed in our news updates. Fightful have reached out to sources connected to Bray to confirm the news was in fact untrue and described it as falsely reported mental health issues. The Fightful report states that Wyatt is 100% healthy and able to wrestle, and that during his time off, specifically in May and June, he had been busy with family engagements. Whilst away from television, he is said to have been working on adding creative elements to his character, and the original plan was in fact to see him return on last night's Raw in Orlando, Florida ahead of SummerSlam, this of course before his release last month. It's likely that whatever these new creative elements are, they will be implemented into whatever he does next in his career, and perhaps the artwork of the new mask that we saw earlier is part of what he's been working on. Either way, it's great to hear that Bray is doing just fine, and I look forward to seeing what's next in his career. And before you go, why not check out my video where I discuss 5 ways that AEW could book the debut of CM Punk.